Welcome to the Attack Action Podcast,
where we talk about friendship, fun times, and most importantly, flesh and blood. Here are your hosts, Taylor and Isaac.
Hello, Attactioneers. This is Taylor, one of the hosts of the Attack Action Podcast. I'm here with my best friend and the other host of the podcast, Isaac. What's up, my guy?
It's been a scorcher here in California. So I've been spending more time indoors, just weathering the heat wave we've been embroiled in, but it's almost over. So that's going to be really nice. I think in town it was like 115 the other day, which if you're Celsius, that's like 43 or 44 or something. But this is just very hot. So happy to be moving past that. Unrelated to flesh and blood, but it's very newsworthy. It was severe.
Yeah, I had to cancel all practices for the high school the other day because it was too hot and would be unsafe. I'm really looking forward to fall season because I like fall very, very much, and I don't like the heat. And my fall/winter wardrobe is much cuter than my summer wardrobe. So I look forward to that. Because now school's started, so I got to have all my fits prepared, my drip.
Yeah.
I have to slay.
Different thing every day.
Yeah, these are all slang words that the kiddos are using these days. So,
I felt like we said slay. Did that just come back around?
Probably.
Nice. It's all cyclical.
Totally. In hot news, the homecoming theme was picked. I know now everybody's like, isn't this a flesh and blood podcast? But yeah, now I work at a high school teacher.
They're used to it by now.
Yeah, you got to get used to it. The homecoming theme has been chosen, potentially the worst theme of all time. It is Will Ferrell movies is our homecoming theme.
Like each person dresses up as a different Will Ferrell, or
like
the
each
theme
class,
of the room.
Each class, like the senior class will have their Will Ferrell movie of choice float, and the juniors,
gotcha,
etc. So we'll see how that plays out.
I don't know, whatever they want to do, could be good.
Totally. They voted on it, kind of. I feel like the seniors kind of bullied the underclassmen into voting for what they wanted.
No way. That's wild.
Anyway, so that's the big news I have for the school year so far. So
nice.
Yeah. Welcome to the Attack Action Podcast. We have a wonderful interview with U.S. national champ Tariq Patel, maybe soon to be the Canadian national champ and U.S. national champ Tariq Patel. But so we have that interview for you today. It was a ton of fun. Great dude. It was my first time really getting to talk to him, but he's been on so many podcasts. I felt like I already knew him already. So easy transition for me. And dare I say, we hit it off, the three of us.
We did. Which country do you think he'll conquer after Canada? Like next year, as he collects flesh and blood national championship trophies. You think he'll go after Hayden down there, down under
in Australia?
Or you think he'll go over to Europe, maybe get, the Polish, the German. There's a lot of good players in Europe over there.
I think he's going to the UK, right? He's just going to hop on over, right?
Nice.
So easier maybe to immigrate to the UK because of, I don't know, is Canada a former colony of? It is of the UK, so maybe easier to get over there. And then you're a little bit closer to like Spain, and then you go to Spain and, etc.
Maybe
you just make your way over to Australia, give Hayden Dale his time.
Australia is one of those Commonwealth countries too. They're all like
No, that's
baked
true.
beans and eggs, and long live the
Bangers, bangers and
monarchy, and
mash.
all
Yeah.
that business.
Oh yeah. Speaking of that, Queen Elizabeth passed away most recently in the news.
She did, which I'm sure she was a very fine person, and as an American, that means like literally nothing to me. No offense to anybody, not
Yeah, totally.
detracting
Just
from people who
yeah,
care, but just like it's just such a foreign concept for me.
totally.
you know,
Kind of wild though. 70 years as the queen, and like came to power when or her coronation was like the first one on live television broadcast. Like 53 or 52 or something like that. So kind of a
yeah, really,
long,
really good run.
yeah, long historic time to kind of be a influential person, and for that to kind of be over now is potentially a big moment in history.
Her
So
son almost didn't get to be king at all. He's getting on in his age as well.
yeah, totally. So anyway, just interesting, global stuff. I don't know. Me and Isaac haven't been hanging out very much because I'm very busy with school and life and stuff. So um, sorry, we're doing a bit of catch up here at the beginning of the podcast, but let's get into flesh and blood news now rather than global and local news. So Isaac, what has happened in flesh and blood since last we podcasted?
So Prison reached living legend status, which has
Mm-hmm.
huge ramifications for the meta. Um, I actually very much liked the design space of Prism. I thought it was very interesting and a very like fun to play and kind of interesting hero. It was a bit controversial though because she had so many polarizing matchups and kind of gate kept and made like it unfun to play for a lot of heroes. So I definitely understand the complaints about her and the oppressive nature of that floaty librarian. Who knew the havoc she would wreak based on her illustration. But now she's gone, and we have a replacement in Dromai in some senses, but I think that the Guardians and Rangers, and especially those poor wizards out there, can all play the game again. Hurrah. Speaking of which, I tweeted about this earlier, but the Guardians are like fucking angry. They're hyper aggressive. They're not messing around. They're just like, they're aggravated. There's a lot of pent up Guardians out there, and now they're unleashed and just hammering down. It's not like block and tempo out. No, you're getting crippling crushed, pummeled every turn. It's brutal. So so I'm glad they're having fun again, I guess.
Yeah. Congratulations to Prism for the first true living legend hero. No bans. Did it. Made it to the top of the mountain. Yeah, I don't I'm like cool. I'm glad it's gone. As a Icelander player, I am really happy one of my terrible matches is just now gone. So way easier now. So uh still a lot to figure out, but we're getting there. This playing as Icelander, I feel like this whole time is gonna pay off eventually.
Oh
It's
yeah,
starting, the meta is starting to look rather favorable. So
she's scary. She's
watch
definitely
out,
scary.
everybody. In
Yeah.
other news, oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna. I mean, I feel your pain because there's plenty of hard matchups like Ranger into Guardian is like tough, and I don't love playing it, but it's like still interesting, and you're still having fun. Playing Kano into Prism was just the least fun I've ever had playing this game. Like things like that is like I get everybody's pain. I get it. So I feel you, Taylor. It's like good
Yeah.
she's gone to have some fun again in those matchups or those regards. All right,
Yeah.
what were
And
you gonna?
well, just to piggyback off our last little bit of Prism, if all it does is shake up the meta, or it just has made things more interesting as well. And I appreciate that, like, um, just the meta changing and stuff keeps things interesting, which is a weird thing I struggle with. I think that there needs to be like some sort of artificial, or not artificial, but there needs to be some way to shake up the meta, or else you get bored, right? It's like a weird thing that happens in card games, but that you're like still playing a game and it's still fun, but you're like, oh, it's been, 5 weeks of kind of the same thing, which feels like an eternity, but in the grand scheme of life is like no time at all. And you're just like, when is this hero going to LL? When are they going to ban this? When's the new set coming out? So sometimes I feel like a spoiled brat,
That
and
is
I
an
have those
interesting.
feelings.
Yeah, that is an interesting point because for me, actually, like in this meta with Prism still existing, I thought it was a very fun meta.
Totally.
But in like the Starvo meta, everybody's just like, will they please make an announcement and get rid of Starvo? He has 1,500 points,
Yeah. Yeah.
Come on. But so, yeah, I think that is a pretty interesting point that we need it to shake up. But I think that that's a lot of times just because there isn't perfect balance. So you want the strongest or the most oppressive thing to leave so that things can rotate. But, you know, I guess my just musing on that is actually in this previous meta, even with Prism in it, I still felt like the meta was fresh and fun, at least for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Totally. I agree.
Uniquely this meta though.
Yeah, uniquely this meta. Yeah, no, this whole time the CC meta has been very enjoyable. Um, at least compared to the most previous one to that. And so now with Prism gone, it's even more interesting. And then if Briar goes, like, that's going to be also extremely interesting. And so keep us kind of um engaged until Dynasty comes out. And that is the other piece of news, is that we have the Dynasty set has been released. We've seen the key art. There's a crown, another one that makes you royal. We have gold tokens, and we know that the Emperor is a legendary card in the set and is a pseudo Runeblade.
That's that is fairly true. We have noticed that, or we have been told now though that the Emperor is a legendary, a la Shiana,
Yeah,
and is a Blitz only character at least for the time being.
right.
Um, he has a huge card pool, which having dual classes is like a really dangerous design space. But the restriction of having only red cards, I guess, really caps, what you how you can break the game with him. So, pretty fun hero. We'll see if it's just for collecting or for fun like Shiana, or if he's actually good.
Yep. Time will tell. It's a bigger supplemental set as well, I think, right? It's like in the mid 200s per card count. I don't, somebody knows for sure. I could pull it up, but, it doesn't matter too much. So that's kind of cool that it's maybe a slightly bigger set. And oh, Christ. I had a good quip about this Dynasty Emperor. Oh, yeah, that's what my question was. Uh, it's very early in the morning. We've been up very
Well,
early
it's
interviewing
okay.
Tariq.
Even if you don't have the quip or the joke, you can just tell us about it, and it's the same.
Yeah, totally. Uh, when do you think would would you feel okay with them giving us another Runeblade character? So if one comes out in Dynasty, is that still too soon, or do we have to wait until March? Would we feel okay that if they had another hero, or would we have to wait and set even after that before you're like, okay, it's fine now that we have a new Runeblade hero?
I think it would be fine in March. That's a good question, actually. So it seems likely that Briar will LL. Also in news, they changed the Living Legend system.
Yeah.
But in this Twilight Hour approaching Nationals season, I think Briar still, she has to win like 3 or 4 Nats or something. Because she accumulated so many points before the change, she's still in danger of achieving Living Legend really fast here.
Yeah.
But I think rune blades are like a very integral part of metas, and you know, are like more aggressive, but unlike Phi, are like more vulnerable on different, axes or fronts or whatever. And just like they're just always an interesting part of the meta you have to like kind of tech to play against. Right. So I
Right.
think rune blades are really healthy for the game. Um, my only qualm has been that like every rune blade has needed a ban and almost no other characters have. That just the strength of them has been compared to everyone else. Rune blades have steadily been overpowered or broken, and not many other classes have been. So I guess that the slightly overpowered design space or the strength of Rosetta or something, should be addressed in the next Runeblade production, I guess. But, I'm not a designer. I know it's probably a very fine line between making a fun, strong new hero and making a too weak hero or too strong hero. So I'm not, no judgment there or anything. Just like that's been the biggest pattern in the game, has been the little bit oppression of the Runeblades. So lots of people love to play them. They have a very large card pool. You want to make use of those cards. I think another Runeblade would be just fine in March. I just don't want it to dominate the next meta.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you want a new Runeblade soon?
Um, Potentially, but it also is fine taking a Runeblade break. It's like totally okay with me. But I mean, I would like a new Shadow Runeblade that gets to utilize some of the cards that Chain didn't get to utilize. Like Dimensional Crossroads, um, or some of the 2-cost Blood Debt cards you can play from Banish and that sort of thing. So, or somebody that uses Dread Scythe, that would be great. So that would be my only caveat for a Runeblade, is that I get to use cards I own and haven't gotten to play with in a competitive manner yet. But in terms of like when the right time is, I still feel like if whatever set comes out, like if there's one in Dynasty, it feels too soon. Maybe March feels too soon. But then it's like, I don't know how safe it is to have new characters in the supplemental sets, because they also are like blitz only a lot of times. So I don't know if that's helpful, but um, we'll see. I'm sure there are people on both sides of that fence and in between who are like, no more rune blades forever, want the rune blade right now, and somewhere in between. I don't really have a super clean answer.
What if the new Shadow Runeblade, it's like pay 2 for this 5 or 6 attack or whatever, or pay 3 and banish the top card of your deck or something like that, So you
Isn't
can
that what
still like
Kano
banish.
does? Is pay 3 and banishes the top card of his deck?
Well, it's like an additional cost to your cards. You can pay more and get more cards, right? Because the new Shadow Runeblade has to somehow banish their cards
Right.
to get like hand advantage. But the shackles were maybe a bit much because you just get extra bonuses for free. So I was just
So
thinking of,
then, yeah. Huh.
like an
That's
attack is like 2 for 6, or it's 3 for 6, and you can banish the top card of your deck, or something like that.
hmm. Yeah, interesting. Could be true. It would be interesting if you had to pay to banish your cards, maybe to hindering but to build up your banish zone to then have like a big combo. You know what I
Like
mean?
once per turn, pay one, banish a card, go again. Something
Yeah,
like that.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, we'll see.
But yeah, I'm not a card designer. I'm just a podcaster. What else do we have in the news, Isaac? Are we forgetting something?
Just the aforementioned living legend change.
Oh, right.
Go look it up. But it's like it's a really good change. Right now, the amount of events has vastly outpaced the I guess the balance of the number of points you need to achieve living legend. So heroes were going to achieve living legend status way too quickly, and we would be out of heroes. So they've changed it to where it's like kind of proportional or kind of percentage based, right? So there will be like 3,000 classic constructed living legend points, whatever, injected into the year of competitive play. So
Right. So
in
there's like,
theory, 3 heroes could LL, but that would be perfectly balanced. And like odds are everybody will just accumulate some.
yeah. So it's like each of the classic constructed seasons. So if we take this last year, for example, there were 2 ProQuest seasons and 1 Road to National season. And so each of those, now stop me if I'm wrong, but I believe we'll have 1,000 possible points. And then the win percentage of that will go, whoever wins the most gets the most points out of those 1,000 and et cetera on down the line, rather than just a strict number
Yep.
based on your win. And then it'll be like that for each season. If I read
Sounds
the
right.
article for the second time correctly the other day.
Sounds right. Go look it up. I don't have any more news, but I do have one little qualm that I've now tweeted about twice, because that's what you do when you just have qualm, because we all have a platform now. So rabble. But I just want to know, if you're playing in Worlds and you drop day 1, if there will be a calling spot reserved for you in day 2 or the first day of the calling, or if you have to buy a ticket ahead of time. Previously, they have reserved spots for that tournament in the calling for those people who do drop and want to play the calling. But they tell you to buy your calling tickets ahead of time to be prepared and not miss out, but then they don't specify or let us know if you need a calling ticket just in case, or if they'll reserve one for you, or how many they'll reserve, or anyway. It's just been a little bit annoying trying to plan for that, just because I don't want to buy like a expensive calling ticket if I don't need to, but I don't want to miss out for not planning. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, it makes
LSS,
total sense.
if anybody listens, just please let me know. All right, that's my gripe.
No, it's a valid gripe, and is like, again, the stuff on the margins LSS can improve on, and part of their growing pains this past year is like these little bit of details and fine tuning of their event structure and schedules and all of that stuff is, there are a few things missed. And so hopefully in the future, we will have these sort of things shorn up for everybody so that they can plan their lives accordingly. So tickets have been bought for Worlds. We're going. We got our Airbnb all set up. It's going to be a great time. Can't wait for November.
Do you have any other news or shout outs?
Just shout out to all the homies in their respective nationals for this month. So Hayden Dale's got to go. We're recording this after day 1 at Australian Nationals. So friend of the pod, Hayden Dale's got to go 3-0 to make top 8 right now. I believe in him. He can do it, defend his title. Tariq Patel is going into Canadian Nationals the week after that with friend of the pod, Yuki Lee Bender. So just shout out to everyone who's participating in Nationals, and good luck to them. Good luck to Tommy Fresh for US Nats. Oliver Fye, all the NorCal crew going to nationals. So just, good luck to all of them. I believe in you all.
Yeah, I
That's
was
it.
still flirting with the idea of attending, but there's just no way. It's too much. It's like not a perfect or affordable location to like, fly to, and it's anyway. I really wanted to go and I still want to go, but I think I have to bow out, unfortunately, because it's just like, especially with Worlds coming up and, you know, again, the North Carolina location. I mean, they have to move it around and it has to be in a good place for everybody, but just is a little bit too tough, right now. And my flight could just get canceled. That's pretty wild. Good luck,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah,
won't be
totally.
going to
Good luck.
nationals this year, but maybe next year. Taylor.
Maybe next year. Who knows? It depends on when it is and how I can plan. All of these things get easier if I know the general full calendar of the year for Flesh and Blood events. So all of these big tournaments wind up coming right at the start of school / the start of basketball season, where I am like have way less time, and it's such a much more gargantuan effort to coordinate everything and get prepared and stuff. So um, if I can know well in advance, it'll be easier to kind of schedule my busy teacher, administrator, coaching life around it. So definitely want to try to go to US Natch next year. But I mean, if it's like, closer to Thanksgiving, impossible, because then it's just full swing of basketball season. So we'll see. Hopefully we will get to know what happens for 2023 at the beginning of 2023, not figure it out month beforehand. Anyway, if you enjoy our podcast and would like to support us, there are a variety of ways you can do that. Like and subscribe and comment on all of our stuff. That's really helpful. The algorithm gods we must appease so that we can then reach more audience members and grow our community. So that would be really great if you did that. You could support us on Patreon. Gets you access to our Discord, our monthly social events, and just get to hang with our cool community of listeners. It's just a really good community, and if we ever get any promos, we're hooking you guys up in the Discord and that sort of thing. And it's just $4 a month, 1 cup of coffee. Coffee is very expensive, and if you're out there getting a latte, you can just skip one day of a latte and give us those $4. It really does help out. You can also just tell a friend. You're at your local armory, you got your Attack Action podcast sticker. You're like, yo, check this podcast out. It's really great. These guys are really funny and you should listen to them. And they'll be like, cool, I'll check it out. And then next time at Armory, you'll be like, wow, what a great episode that was. And then our new listener that you created will be like, totally is. Thanks so much for recommending them. And that's exactly how it goes every time.
Yeah, you'll be like, I didn't need that latte. I appreciate them a lot. Eh? Or something. Sorry, come back to me. We'll work on that. Well, I know you're all here for lawn mowing news and general updates about British royalty and the like. But instead, here's Tariq Patel.
All right. And we're here with Tariq Patel. What's up, my guy?
Not too much. Thank you for having me, you guys. I feel honored to be on this podcast finally. I've been deep in the trenches preparing for nationals. Just got back from Europe a couple days ago. So getting over the jet lag, but otherwise I'm doing well and feeling happy.
Nice. Well, that's why we wanted to have you on because we've actually wanted to have you on the show for a really long time. You just did like a million interviews, and we wanted to, get you on to talk about something fresh. So it's been a long
Yeah.
time coming, but now you're about to conquer another nation.
I'd say it's more like returning home to the nation I was from. So it's been a weird kind of trip back because all these guys that I used to play with are now like 8 years older than what I remember. The scenes kind of changed a little bit. I used to be part of the Magic scene back in the day, but it almost feels like I'm coming home, but also there's kind of new grounds to kind of conquer in terms of flesh and blood. So I'm excited for nationals next weekend, and I'm excited to get my first real taste of what competitive flesh and blood is like in the Canada region, not just from Ontario, but from all over.
Heck yeah. So we're recording this the weekend of the first weekend of nationals. So Australian nationals is kind of being streamed most famously, and your team member Nick Butcher was featured and said that you basically just did all of the heavy lifting for his deck here, his old him deck for Fab Nationals, and he owes all his success to you. How do you feel about that?
That's definitely not true. So let me preface it by saying Nick's played a lot of old him, going back a while, and I'm a big believer in the 80-20 rule. I actually just wrote an article about my preparation for Pro Tour Lily, where like 80% of your results come from about 20% of the initial effort you come in. It's that last 20% that you really have to work on and kind of iron out. So Nick has, almost a year worth of Oldhim experience because he loves the Guardian archetype, like in general. I even believe he played Oldhim over in Singapore. So as little as 2.5, 3 weeks ago, he's been playing Guardian recently at a high level. All I really did was I kind of ironed out the last couple slots, you know, talked to him about certain matchups that I thought we were not coming out at in the correct way. Tweaking how we approach the Briar matchup, tweaking kind of the slots, because now that Prism doesn't exist in the metagame, it actually doesn't just change one or two cards from a list. It will change like five or six, because now that you don't need to worry about Prism, the metagame is going to be slightly different. Now you need to worry about XYZ decks a little bit less. So it's more just kind of being his bouncing board, I'd say. I definitely don't think uh, I'm the reason he's doing well, or I deserve any more credit. I think he's doing it all on his own. And it was a very just Nick Butcher kind of shout out for him to do.
Well, he's
Yeah,
in first
totally.
place as we record this, so this could age really well or, poorly. We'll have to find out as the day moves on.
Some more. I have some more questions about Nick Butcher. I know you are our guest right now, but two things. One is, what's he like behind the scenes? Because you obviously have spent a lot of time with him because he's on Team Dragon Shield, but his public persona is one of a cranky, doesn't give a fuck type of dude. And I'm just wondering, is that all a facade? Is he really like the sweetheart of the three of you? And journals every night, and just makes
Uh,
lovely Earl Grey for everybody in the morning or something.
Nick's an interesting character. I would say his persona that's perceived by the public is probably a little bit overplayed to what he's actually like, but it's not far off. So what you see is more or less what you get. But funnily enough, he's probably the most endeared person in our friend group. So my girlfriend Amanda has been with me for Pro Tour 1 and now Pro Tour 2, and she's kind of lived with us throughout the entire testing process. And I think Amanda likes Nick the best out of everybody there. So like he's very like endearing in his own like Nick Butcher kind of way. And I think everybody loves him. We didn't just stay with our team this time. We stayed with a bunch of Canadians as well, and all the Canadians like him a lot. Um, it's almost to the point where like you always know where you stand with Nick. Like if you do something that he doesn't like, he'll just flat out tell you to like screw off, or like I don't want to do this, or if you go give him a hug or something after he does something well, he'll be like, I don't like being touched. Like he's just that type of guy. But I love him, and I think everybody else that hangs around him and gets to know him loves him. So, and he's a very intelligent guy. Obviously, he's very smart, and he's just kind of waiting out for his breakout tournament. And I really do think this Australian Nationals is going to be it.
Nice. My kind of dude. Say what you mean. I like it.
So who snores more, him or Matt? Or is it you? Are you the guy they got to put in the separate room across the Airbnb so everybody can sleep?
So I don't know because I think every time we've stayed together, it's been in an Airbnb. I think the only person I've ever shared a room with is Matt, back in the calling in Cincinnati, I want to say. And as far as I remember, Matt didn't snore. And I asked him immediately because I'm like, do I snore? Because, with my girlfriend, she likes to tease me all the time. Oh, you snored yesterday, or like you did this yesterday. And like, so I got to double check on her. So I asked Matt, I'm like, Matt, do I snore? And he's like, no. So, as far as I know, nobody snores. I will say the one guy that did snore was Rob. I've spent some overnight bingers with Rob, like at the casino or like abroad, and he's the snorer of the group. But thankfully, in the Airbnb, we all got our separate rooms.
Nice. Sleep is important, as you know, as a doctor. So there's also a bit of an elephant in the room, and let's get this out of the way at the beginning of the show. So the three of us are A, super handsome, B, super good at flesh and blood, C, all three of us have dogs, and we all play Dungeons and Dragons. So I need to know about your dog and then about your Dungeons and Dragons escapades.
Okay, yeah. So right now, because I moved back to Canada, I've actually moved back into my mother's home, and she has a dog as well, which is a golden retriever. So right now, I'm living in a house with three dogs. So we have a purebred golden retriever. His name is Charlie. He's about 6 or 7 years old. So he's getting kind of up there. We have a Great Pyrenees, who I like to consider as my dog. If you haven't seen them, they're basically like big, fluffy white golden retrievers. Like imagine a golden retriever, but it's just pure white. They're from like the south of France, north of Spain kind of region. And that's my dog. She's actually kind of on the more scared side, which is funny because it's the most loved dog in the world, but she loves barking at everything and she drives everybody nuts in the house. And when I'm on Discord with my friends, all you hear is like her barking in the background at the voices in her head. And then finally, we have a pit lab mix. If you ask our landlords, though, she's a lab mix, and I know nothing about the pit side, but she's like the most loving, sweet dog ever. Despite she has a lot of pit features, though, so when people first see her, they're kind of hesitant, right? Because everybody sees a pit and naturally associates that with like aggressive tendencies. But the minute you get to know her, she's like the sweetest dog, and probably the sweetest dog out of the three we got.
Nice.
What was the other part? Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I wouldn't say I'm like a super tryhard D&D person, but for me, it's like a way to just stay connected with the friends I've had since like middle school. So my two best friends, like Madison and Jeffrey, I've known them since I was 5 years old. Like we met in like grade one, senior kindergarten type area, and we've just been friends all throughout. And then obviously in middle school, you start playing games, and Madison was the one that introduced us to Dungeons and Dragons, and we used to play it like at recess and all that. And then as you grow up, people go different high schools, different colleges. We go off to America to work. Some people stay here, so it was kind of just a way for us to kind of stay in touch. And like we'd still like talk or whatever, but it's always fun to have like a kind of game as a median to kind of facilitate that interaction. So we used to kind of, I guess we still do, try and get together weekly to play a couple hours on Saturday or Sunday on Sunday on like Roll20. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that website, but
Yeah, we are.
yeah, Roll20, and we'll hang out a campaign or two every couple of months.
Yeah. So I was wondering, just because you're, a very competitive, excellent card player. So in D&D, are you like aggressively min-maxing and very competitive, or are you just like getting, your other kicks out? Are you like relaxed and role playing your, elven flute player just to like get away from the competitive scene totally? How do you approach this starkly different game?
I am kind of a min-maxer, which is like not something
Nice.
I'm proud of, but like I just like don't want to die, right? Like it's not fun dying. So like right now I have a level 1 fighter or maybe level 2 fighter now and level 8 barbarian. So I'm min-maxing a barbarian fighter. And I'm gonna get this wrong, and some D&D person that knows the rules way more than me is gonna jump on me. But in the previous version, there used to be like encounter abilities. I'm gonna mess this up, but like you had like once an encounter,
Mhm.
like type things that you could only use, and they like refresh only during encounters. And like at one point, I was like trying to get the dungeon master to like let me capture this like feral fucking animal that I could just carry around with me, and I could refresh that encounter action like whenever I wanted to on demand. So like I would try do shit like that. So yes, I was like aggressively min maxing and like optimizing characters. But to me, that's the fun part, right? And I think what's fun about these games is that the DM or the dungeon master like knows everybody's kind of personalities. And I'll role play too, right? Like my barbarian is very low intelligence. Like he's an absolute moron. But like if there's something and let's like consistent with the game that I think an idiot would do, I like do make my barbarian do that because like I don't want my like 7 intelligence barbarian fighter to be making like intelligent decisions, right? Like so
Right.
he'll walk into traps sometimes and I'm just like in my head I'm like I know this is going to happen, but this is how his name is Max Power. I'm like this is how Max Power would act if he was in this scenario. So it goes both ways kind of.
Totally. Gullible fools are like a lot of fun to play for sure. Very
Yeah.
bold, courageous, gullible characters. Um, yeah, that's like part of it though. That is part of the fun because I'll do that. I'm like, well, can I capture this wolf? Well, will you let me keep it? Can I just have it? And I don't know. I feel like that's part of the DM's job, unfortunately, is to kind of like rein you in because just get away with
Oh
what
yeah.
you can.
I'll abuse every nook and cranny, so long as the DM will let me. And there'll be times that they'll be like, "No, you can't do that." Or like, she's like, "You roll a dice and like it doesn't work." It's like they haven't even checked like a DC modifier. They're just like, "No, you failed."
Yeah, totally. Because it gets out of hand, for sure. But yeah, I love D&D. For me, it is that like really fun shared time of telling a story with your friends. Um, and for me personally, I'm okay if my character dies. I'm like, if that just happens, like, cool, I'll get to tell a story with like another character. Cause there's just like so many variations and options for cool characters to play that if mine dies, it's totally fine. And sometimes I even talk to my DM and I'm like, this story arc is over.
Mhm.
Or in a previous campaign we had, I was part of this. My friend was like my brother, and we were both dwarf rogues. And my character was kind of like that larger than life character and like stealing shit all of the time and like lots of antics that were like really fun. Um, but I thought that there would be a cooler story beat if I like got a little too drunk during a celebration and then picked a fight I couldn't win and then just died. And nobody knew that was going to happen except for the dungeon master. But funny enough, another person in that same party came up with a similar idea secretly for the exact same session. So we had like this really awkward session where two party members kind of like in the first hour like kind of die, like for no real super reason. And so it kind of like dampened this like moment I thought I was going to have with everybody. But then like 20 minutes later, it was like, oh yeah, and by the way, this other guy dies. And then like, 20 minutes after that, two new party members, and just everybody moved on so quickly. And it was kind of missed the beat on that one. But sometimes that's how it goes. And that's,
And that's
a part of
exactly
the
why we
story. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly why you play D&D or for these memories. Like I still remember my most memorable campaign was when like the long and short of it was there was two other guys, and one of them ended up falling in this pit. And I guess like in between sessions, the dungeon master pulled him aside and told him like he died, and he was actually replaced with a doppelganger. So he was playing kind of like a double agent through the rest of the campaign. And the way it ended
Cool.
was he actually ended up killing us, and that's how like that story arc kind of ended. And I'll never forget that, because it's like he played the part so perfectly, and then
That's
we all ended
cool.
up dying to our friend who was like a party member. So yeah, those kind of stories just stick with you, and we still laugh about it. And that happened like 15 years ago, maybe. So when we were like
Yeah,
teenagers, just in high school. So yeah, that's the reason we play these games, and it's absolutely hilarious when stuff like that happens.
totally. Yeah, it's a great time. All right, back to Flesh and Blood. Thank you for humoring me. Excellent. Go ahead, Isaac.
All right, let's see. Oh no, so I wanted to ask one more personal question. So you play a lot of golf,
Hmm.
and Taylor and I are interested in different types of sports or sports sciencey things, and I was just wondering, like sometimes I draw a lot of parallels between certain activities or sports and Flesh and Blood, maybe just the mental game. But I was wondering if you like ever if your golf game, if you ever draw any parallels between golf and Flesh and Blood, or if they're just totally separate in your mind, or how that works for you.
I actually like them because they're complete opposites. So when I get frustrated with one aspect of my life, I like to have things that are complete opposites that I can kind of go to. So, I have
Mm-hmm.
work, I have my social relationships, I have golf, and then I have gaming. But even when I go back from my leisures like golf and gaming, in Flesh and Blood and card games, there's a lot of variance in it, right? Like we can't pick or choose where we draw well or draw poorly or take our wins, take our losses. But golf is the complete opposite. It's such a deterministic sport where like every little micro decision you make in your swing and your thought process in your practice matters, and it carries over day to day. So like when I get frustrated from the variance aspect of card games, I can just like stop thinking about that and just like go work on a very repetitive thing, which is like my golf swing. So I'll spend like 2 3 hours on the range sometimes doing nothing but working on like how my palm is facing at the top of my swing, and when I bring it down, is it still like perpendicular to the sky, like just really tiny aspects like that I can then go translate over to 2 weeks from now when I play a golf game. So I actually enjoy it because it's completely different than Flesh and Blood, and I get my kicks out of I think life in general is best when you have balances. When you not doing too much of one thing over and over.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I just tweeted about this the other day that I took kind of a break from Flesh and Blood to,
Hmm.
do some other stuff. And because like I'm a teacher, and so school started up, so it
Yep.
was just a little too challenging to get the school year going and keep the grind up. So
Mm.
I got to just kind of do some other stuff, outside of Flesh and Blood, and tick some things off of the chore list around the property and that sort of thing. So, and now that we're back on the grind here, it's very refreshing, and I feel way
Yep.
more motivated. And
Well,
I
it's a known
totally,
thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry.
Go
Go ahead.
ahead, Tariq. No. You go ahead, bro.
I was just gonna say you're totally right. Like repetition is what leads to depression. So I'm glad you got that time.
Yeah, totally. And I fully relate to having things separate and not doing, things that have like too many parallels. Like I don't take time off playing Flesh and Blood to just play another competitive card game or something like that. Because I feel that, I don't know. Like I also coach basketball, and so if I did that, like I did it at the collegiate level for a year, and that was like a little too much. You only get like 3 ish, maybe not really, because then you have to like start recruiting kids off a year, and it's just kind of one hell of a grind to be like in charge and managing 15 players all of the time.
Hmm.
And so I appreciate now being back at the high school level where, and I'm at a small high school where my kids like, most of my basketball team is on the football or soccer team right now. So I like don't even have to really interact with them because they have a different coach right now. But then once basketball season starts up, I'm all in, but I can't be all in if I don't have that break.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because, like I said, I was always trying to draw parallels in terms of like, problem solving for your brain and just different ways, performing under fatigue, just different stuff like that in which these things are similar. But I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. But I mean, you're entirely right. Like when you get burned out by the variance, or like sometimes I'll go away and play for a weekend and it's great, but then after that weekend, I'm like, that was a lot of fun in like these ways, but I also just like drove a lot and sat inside a lot. And now it's like Monday afternoon and I'm just kind of like, I don't know, washed out or whatever. So then going and doing something like, physical or adventurous or outside or whatever is like very, very refreshing. So, yeah, I just appreciate that point you made in terms of like, maybe now I'll think about them in terms of their similarities and differences a bit more.
Yeah, and physical activity is a huge part. Myself, I'm trying to work on that. I missed the whole Fab Fitness month in July that everybody was participating in because I was moving. I moved from Florida up to Canada and just traveling, just like a really, really busy month. But one thing I'm trying to work on myself is I've let my health slip over the last couple of years. Not 100% on fault to my own. There's only so many hours in a day, and when you're working, 80 hours a week, sometimes, I was sitting a lot, and I was eating cafeteria or hospital food, which isn't the best, honestly, as sad as that is. So, I missed the Fab Fitness month in July, but my goal is from now, what are we, early September until Worlds in November. I'm going to be doing my own little fitness challenge, and we'll see how far I get. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. We do a lot of sitting in card games, and weeks away, while they're fun intellectually, physically, they're actually taxing because we're just sitting there and being lumps of clay instead of up and active, and that takes a toll on the body and the mind.
Yeah, totally. Me and Isaac try to fit in like a run when we go on like flesh and blood trips. Like when we did the Battle Hardened LA, we like did a run the day before. We were about to like sit and commentate for the whole day, and it makes it like way more bearable. So we don't really run together. Isaac's really fast and he's built like a gazelle. So he just like sprinted around while I just like kind of trotted behind. A very Legolas and Gimli situation.
Get our kills in our own way, though. We did go to Vegas though, and woke up and we're like, it's like 92 out and concrete and like that.
So, yeah, totally. At
least
8
sometimes we
a.m.
don't get to it.
Stupid. Okay, let go ahead, Isaac.
All right. So we had a bunch of questions from various fans in our Discord and on Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. So I threw a bunch of these kind of casual or random questions into a little warm-up round for us. Sure. So you can answer these in one word. You can talk longer about them, whatever. But I'm just going to fire them off and, have at them as you like.
Sure.
So first question, what's your favorite card?
Probably Death Dealer.
Nice. Favorite junk food?
Does pizza count? Because I could eat pizza for days. It's either pizza or Flaming Hot Cheetos if you want like junk food.
Nice. Who is the best hero and why is it Bravo?
Well, Starvo is the first hero to Living Legend, so it is Bravo.
That's true.
Nice.
Just upgraded. How many knickknacks does it take to bric-a-brac?
I'd say about 1 or 2 based on the metagame.
What hero would be the most and also least fun at a party?
Most fun. Probably Bravo, because he is the star of the show. Least fun? Probably Viserai, because he's very like brooding and so forth. I don't know if he'd be getting along very well.
What turn from an opponent has gotten you the most tilted?
I'm not one that really tilts too easily. It takes a lot to kind of rattle me over the table. In Flesh and Blood, I don't think I can ever. Nothing's jumping out, so.
All right, doesn't tilt. Noted.
Yeah, ice in the veins.
This one just says win a skirmish with Genus. I think that's more of a challenge.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, you heard it here first.
And
Tariq
last,
Patel will win a skirmish with Genus. What you need.
I mean,
Got it.
undetermined time frame.
So
Genus may be
funny
broken
story.
later.
Yeah.
The funniest side, I had a friend over in Lille, and he went up to a Genus character that was cosplaying, I guess, and he goes up to him and he's like, "That's a really cool costume." And the guy like looks at him and like finger guns him. And he's like, "What you need?" And my friend, who has no idea the name of the car, is just like, "What the hell is this guy talking about?" Like walks away, and he tells us the story later. He's like, "The guy looked at me and said, 'What you need?'" And we're all like, "You're an idiot." Like that's literally the card name.
Nice. Stayed in character. This question is from Colin. Did you move to Canada because you were too scared to defend your title?
Yes, that is exactly why. Over here in Snow, Mexico, it's a lot easier. So I figured, I figured I'd go back north and play with the Snow Mexicans instead of down in the land of the free.
Totally. Flake keeps saying that it's really soft up in Canada and there are no good players. So, I think you'll have a good time.
Okay. There's a lot of good players in our area.
Sorry, just shooting shots at Flake.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for doing that little lightning round with us.
Yeah.
You ready to kick it off here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So approaching this competitive season, we're facing a lot more of an open meta, right? Mm-hmm. Where players are more rewarded for being skilled pilots at their own decks or kind of being mains. It's a lot harder to target the meta because there isn't a clear, villain. It's just quite a lot different than the Cheerios or the Starvo metas. So, how does that differ from, I don't know, I would say like the past year of play? How do you approach looking into this competitive season?
That's an interesting question because from this point all the way back since the beginning of TCGs, in every game ever, there's always been a best deck in the format, right? We just don't know what it is yet. So when we're at the start of a new format where Prism just left and there's a big kind of shakeup as to what are the proportion of heroes that will likely be represented, I try and focus on what hero will do the best into an open metagame. And it's a little bit different than like, say, a Starvo format where there's Starvo Chain and then every other deck behind that, like Prism and so forth, where you're kind of just trying to pick your slight metagame advantage depending on the week cycle. Is Starvo slightly more popular this week? Okay, maybe we play, Prism this week. Oh, is Prism a little bit more popular? Maybe we play Chain this week. Is Starvo popular again? And it goes in a circle. So right now, we haven't had an established hierarchy yet in this metagame. I think one will inevitably come, just like it does with every single metagame. We will call this, XYZ format in a couple months, almost guaranteed. Mm-hmm. So right now, it differs in the way that I'm just looking for what that next X deck is.
So how much is this weekend's Nationals going to affect next weekend's Nationals? Do you think that's enough time, or do you feel like we're on like a 2-week cycle? Like what happens here in Australia will affect US Nationals, which is in 2 weeks, more than it affects Canada and so forth?
Yeah, it's tough because it's dependent on what wins, right? So, there's certain decks that are technically a little bit harder to play that you can't just pick up. I learned that kind of the hard way playing Dash of the Pro Tour, right? It was quite a 180 from like your normal Runeblade deck because you have to learn a bunch of different algorithms for pistol reload cycles and when to float mana through turn cycles, when not to. So like, let's say a control dash or mid-range dash like we were playing at the Pro Tour wins Australian Nationals this weekend. I don't think it would affect the metagame too much in 1 week because it would be very hard if on the Sunday you saw that dash wand to go pick up the deck from scratch if you don't have any experience and then learn it for the next week, even if it is the best deck out there. But if it's a deck, say like Briar that wins or Viscerai, and we have just a large number of people that are comfortable with that archetype already, then it's a fairly easy switch. Mm-hmm. I will also say the Australian metagame is a little bit atypical compared to what I would have expected. I think Viserai was the most played hero by a
Yeah.
ton.
Yeah.
And I don't. Australia and New Zealand as well has always had a history of, instead of playing the best deck, they like to play the deck that they perceive to beat the best decks. So their
Right.
metagames are a little bit atypical. So if this was, let's say, UK nationals or German nationals, I would say it would probably be pretty indicative of what the rest of the format would look like. But I wouldn't be surprised if we get the Australian nationals top 8 and then Canada nationals and then US nationals 2 weeks later. It looks completely different than what we're going to get this weekend.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, yeah, it's like now in the game, like there's just, we were kind of talking about this earlier, that there's a few too many heroes that you can play at like a fairly high level for you to just like pick up decks and then like do really well, because we just don't have that a more linear game plan from some certain heroes. I mean, I guess to some degree Oldhim can be a bit more linear than others, but you have to like navigate that matchup to a separate degree than you do something like back in the day when you were, playing Chain or Cheerios Briar or something like that, because you have the clock as part of your enemy as well. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think so. What you said is pretty interesting about how there's always a best deck, because, I tend to agree in general when you measure it across, the entire meta, right? Or the spectrum of heroes. But I mean, it just seems like right now, and I could end up being very wrong about this, but it seems like right now, like Briar is the best deck at the moment. But that's in theory until there's enough like Old Hymns and Bravos and Ice Lexis show up, right? And then at that point, Dromai is the best deck.
Right.
Then until there's too many Dromais, then Briar is the best deck again. So, um, I do agree some decks are much more powerful than others, and the more resilient decks certainly seem to be the right call. But as the meta shifts enough, certain players will get rewarded for kind of like trying to counter the counter and spiking events. But I know that's a hard call to make, because you can try to like counter the counter and then it didn't move as much as you thought, and you just get like run over by your bad matchup. So I
Yep.
don't know. We're just in a tough place.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, because there's a huge difference between the best deck and then the best deck for that week, right? When I
yeah.
use the term best deck, there's a big assumption that every deck is equally prevalent in the metagame, so your overall win percentage is just higher in a vacuum. But for example, your Ice Lexi deck at Nationals last week was definitely the best deck for that metagame for that weekend. Like, you look at how many Lightning Briars were in the top tables towards the end. Like, for that weekend, Ice Lexi was the best deck. Now, in retrospect, was that the best deck of the format? Of course not, right? You had Oldhim that came out weeks later. You had Viserai that ended up coming Hidden Dale won with. So, like, looking back retrospectively, Lexi wasn't the best deck in the format because it had a bunch of holes. But was it the best deck for U.S. National Weekend? Of course it was.
Yeah, totally. Like right now, I think Viserai or Oldhim are probably the best deck, but it doesn't matter what I think, right? Briar keeps winning.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's tough, and it sucks too, like when you do make that choice to you know, for the metagame choice, you know what I mean? Because you can get hard punished, like Isaac said, and just come into all of your bad matchups, and then that's a whole other like psychological can of worms you have to deal with. Like, oh, I made the wrong call, and oh, I just got so hard punished. That sucks. Like, maybe I'm not great at the game anymore. But you have to, like, I think, keep stuff in perspective. Like, no, your game plan was to try to game the system, and it just didn't pay off, even though it's like probably could have been like a really good idea. There's always variance at every level. Like, you can just get paired terribly round one, and then you're on a different trajectory if you sat one seat to your left or right. So that's the risk there in that, and hard to come back with if it doesn't pay off, for sure.
So let's talk about we had Colin pose us a question to ask you here about, do you have any tips on how to approach practicing or testing with the team? Obviously you're on Team Dragon Shield now,
Hmm.
and you guys practice pretty regularly, and also oftentimes for a week leading up to a tournament.
Yeah. It's a little bit different when you're practicing with a team. I mean, I can only give you how I prefer to do it and some changes that I would like to implement to our own testing process. Um, so more or less, we try and test individually using each other as like sounding boards until we get about a week and a half, 2 weeks out from the tournament, and then we'll start comparing notes. One of my biggest fear in testing, and this goes back even to my Magic days, is I don't like to be inbred, and some of that I can say may have been at play in Pro Tour number one, and I identified that as maybe my number one failure coming away from testing for that event, right? Because I had a really good chain list. It was, very similar to, what Pim Tour ended up winning with, six belittle and so forth. But we got to a point where we got Starvo, like it just like we couldn't lose the chain, right? We were racing it. We ended up having the pulverize in there for an extra
Right.
racing damage effect. So I mistakenly took as like, oh, I'm not beating Starvo with chain at all. You know, the mirror is kind of a coin flip. I'm just going to give up on chain and play Starvo. When in actuality, my thought process should have been, yeah, our team came up with a really good Starvo list, but versus the rest of the metagame, what everybody else is doing, I still have a pretty awesome, chain deck here. So my number one advice would be to practicing with the team is don't get too inbred. Try and practice with a variety of people and then come together and kind of compare notes. And I think it really benefited us this time because we did that in draft, especially.
Hmm.
And we had like several different draft strategies in Uprising, and I think we all came away with fairly decent records. All my draft decks this weekend, even though my overall draft record was like 2-1 in all of them, I mean, that's just the nature of the format. But they were all like A plus decks, with the exception of the draft where I literally sat next to the people I was testing with. So, like, really screwed with my head. But every draft that wasn't that one, I had like A plus, 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 decks.
In one of me and Isaac's RTNs, we got paired, or not paired, but in top 8 we sat next to each other, and Isaac was passing to me, and it was freaking me out
Yeah.
because the quality of the packs was really poor,
Mhm.
and Isaac is passing me cards. At first, when we sat down, I was like, oh, thank God, Isaac's gonna send me clear signals. I'm gonna cooperate with him. This is great. What a load off my mind. And then he passes me my first couple of picks, like picks 2 through 4, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing to me, Isaac? This
Yeah.
is this is messed up, bro. Come
Yeah,
on.
the first 3 packs I saw were like all yellows and trash. I'm not
Yeah,
exaggerating. It was bad.
it was
Mhm.
And
bad.
I'm like looking at Taylor like, I'm so sorry. I don't know.
It's
I don't know what
hard.
I'm doing. I don't know what the person to
Yeah.
my right's doing. I don't know what I'm telling you to do. Just count the class cards, I guess, and pick something.
Yeah, it's really difficult because your friend, we had like pick orders and like things we would take highly. So it really messes with you when you like know somebody's preference and then you see a card that was like higher picked, but the rest of the thing is kind of being cut. It's like, what's kind of happening here? So yeah, that draft was extremely strange, and it's not easy drafting next to your friends.
No, it's definitely not. But yeah, at least I didn't have to play Isaac. That would have been the worst if he was like kitty corner for me. Oh
Hmm.
my God, I would have been upset.
I think that
Rather
rule is
see
kind
you
of
in the
interesting,
finals.
actually, because if everybody drafts perfectly, it's like going to be a bunch of mirrors, which is just kind of odd, you know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess that's just the way it works.
Yeah, this format's so strange. Like the drafting strategy in this format is like so atypical from any other draft I've ever done, and it's just like, I mean, it's not the best format. Let's be honest here, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
like things that can go wrong. You can have the best strategy going in, and then your draft's just a train wreck. But there's definitely things you can do that can maximize your chances of ending up with a playable deck. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, my critique is like outside of picks like 1 through maybe 8 even,
mhm.
I feel like I just have less decisions after those eighth pick. I'm like,
Yep.
okay, here we go. Now I'm
Yep.
just, sitting here praying I get the cards. Yeah, totally.
Yep. Fingers
So
crossed.
it's
Hmm.
yeah. So it's like less fun in that regard, but I've said this quite a few times on the podcast. For whatever reason, even with that, I still really enjoy the like sitting down and playing the games against somebody else's draft deck. Like there's a little bit more nuance in the gameplay,
Hmm.
despite potentially just like making 0 decisions in pack 2 and pack 3,
Yeah.
relative to the ones you have to make early in the draft.
Yeah, I
Yep.
mean, you still have to like count your blues and count your starters with go again. There's a little bit of
Hmm.
nuance. Count your red go again cards for drum or whatever it is. But I definitely agree in general. My favorite part is the like, there's like not enough resources for everybody. So there's a lot of tension, and the signal sending kind of comes into play a lot in this format. My least favorite part, though, is in the 5-year, how freaking hard it is to win if you go first.
Yep.
That's pretty
Yeah.
stupid. But
Yep.
um,
I'm a big believer that you pick 2 out of 3 matchups to try and beat, and hope to God you get lucky against the third.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
You can pick a lot of
Yeah.
poppers and a lot of Aether Ashwing killers if you're Dromai, and try and beat the mirror and an Icelander, and I don't know. Just, I don't know. 2 out of 3. That's like
totally.
Meatloaf said, it ain't bad. So
I've had a sideboard of like 2 red singes and 2 poppers, and I'm like, nice, I'm loaded up for my bad matchup, and then just never
yeah.
play a Dromai, and you're like, well,
Yeah.
those were stupid picks. But
Yep.
I wanted to ask you about you mentioned something about your testing team. So I agree, when you get used to playing the same people or their ideas on decks, then you get kind of surprised. You're like, you're not supposed to consuming volition razor me. Taylor doesn't run that.
Yeah.
Right.
What is this? But so how do you not, I guess, leak any good ideas you have while testing against a lot of, but hold on. First of all, props to you. This is a long time ago, but I was extremely impressed that your Cheerios Briar deck kind of got leaked or got out there ahead of time, and it didn't matter. You still just won Nats with it as the best player on it, despite the whole world getting a hold of it and testing with it. So great job on that.
Thank you.
Anyway, but so how do you test into a large field to make your game the best without like giving away, your like blue heavy Kano combo deck or whatever? Is that
Right.
how do you do that?
It's tough. I'm not gonna lie, I play a lot against just myself. So I literally just have 2 decks. And folks does this too before Fab Online. Like Fab Online's the game changer. It'll like because you can now anonymously play against everybody, and it's gotten big enough to the point where I don't think a deck like Cheerios Briar is going to be found again, just because like there's enough people playing now and enough people trying to abuse the system. Like decks like that are found when you have somebody that's trying to really kind of abuse the limits of the game, and
Mhm.
now there's enough people, right, that are trying to do that with different things. We see folks did it with Belittle Briar, right? So every card that can be abused, I think, will try to be abused in some capacity. So I think those decks will be figured out a little bit more quickly in the future. So now it's like you just kind of. I'm a big believer. More practice is better. A rising tide raises all ships. So I just try and cast a wide net right now, and with Fab Online, I'm going to be just playing against random people on Fab Online. If you've played Fab Online recently, you've probably played against me because I've gemmed so many games. But for this last Pro Tour, specifically with Dash, because it was so unknown, I had to mostly just play against myself, and it's good testing to an extent because kind of I'm playing Briar optimally on the other side, and I'm playing Dash optimally on this side. So I know that my results are somewhat good. Where I've seen some, Briar players misplay this, misplay that, and I'm like, well, should I have actually lost this game? Should I have won this game? But to answer your question, I just play against myself. And Matt does the same, folks does the same, Matt Rogers does the same, Nick Butcher does the same. We all just kind of sit down and play against ourselves right now.
Yeah, I used to play against myself quite a bit, but I stopped doing it because I stopped trusting myself for playing both, like kind of splitting my brain and being able to feel like I was actually doing a good job
Mm-hmm.
challenging myself and that sort of thing. And it kind of takes a lot of time, but maybe I'll get
Yeah.
back into playing myself again. I have less time now, so maybe that's not as time efficient. So I did play. I don't think my school listens to my podcast, but I did during my prep period jam a game on what is it, Talishar online the
Oh
other
yeah,
day.
sorry. Fab
Yeah,
online, Talishar online.
yeah. And that was pretty rad. I was like, ooh, this is dangerous. I need to not have this habit of like, oh yeah, it's sixth period. I'm just gonna jam a game now. I gotta stay focused.
All right, Taylor. You got the next couple questions here.
Okay, sweet. So we just had like some changes to the LL system. So what are your takes on that, Tariq?
I mean, the LL system in general is a cool way of rotating stuff, and they're eventually just going to have an eternal format. I think the rate at which heroes are rotating are a little bit too quick, right? I think a year and a half, a little bit too quick. I think a sweet spot for me is like every 2 years, a new fresh top hero would be kind of the perfect amount, and then bans in between. But I think, James White's article goes in that quite in depth, and he kind of discusses it. And I like he's very on top of it. Like, let's be real. And I think his rationale for a lot of the things that he's doing and a lot of the changing is, exactly the same thing I would be doing. And it's tough too, right? Because as this game grows, what worked 5 months ago might not
Yeah.
work 5 months later. So it's not also their fault, right? If this game grows exponentially, we get a couple more events, we can see heroes LL a little bit faster than what was originally anticipated. So it's a dynamic thing. And I think the system's pretty good, and they're going to have to tweak it as the game grows, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I agree. The game is, growing probably way faster than they can hire people and make new departments and that sort of thing. So, and when the game grows, you have a host of different things you now have to like cover, and that sort of stuff. So I enjoy the changes they've made. But I totally agree with you that like, what does James say? Like between 15 or in 20 months is when they
Yep.
think maybe a top hero could rotate out, which I still feel is like a little too short. You know what I mean? And there's like all of the other things to consider, like now your pimped out Prism deck you spent a long time like collecting all of the promos for, you can't really play out in the wild, which
Yep.
is depending on
Yeah.
how you slice that, depends on what your opinion of that is. Like, you still have the cards and you still collected them and they're still cool, but if a big part of that was getting to play that competitively with all of that bling, then that's a little bit
No. Yeah.
challenging in that aspect. But overall, I think it was it had to change, and they made the right changes for sure.
That's a big deal, and something I probably should have touched on as well is like I have an entire Prism deck that I just finished putting together, and I got Living Legend like a couple weeks later. I haven't played a single game with it or event with it, and for
Yeah.
a newer player, it really is a bottleneck on what they can play and what they can enjoy. And I do think that's an area for improvement for LSS. I think they should have like even just an intro or a structure deck just ready to go. So the minute a light hero gets Living Legend, 2 weeks later or however long later, you send out these like starter decks to a distributor. You don't even have to include like new cards or maybe just a couple new specialization cards, and bam, you got a brand new hero out into the format ready to go. And so people don't have downtime on this legendary foot piece that they've spent $150 acquiring.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's definitely a concern.
illusionists were fortunate because Dromai uses the
Right.
footsteps also, but yeah, that won't always be the case. Like chain LL'd, and you have to switch to Levia if you want to use the husk again. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just a fan. I really bought into the cards don't rotate and you can kind of specialize in like heroes you really enjoy playing. And I understand that some will rotate out, and I think that that's a good thing. But I agree, the slower the better, kind of, so your cards aren't just garbage after a while. I'm just a
Mhm.
fan of kind of, I know there's a balance between just banning cards and then also letting the community figure out counters. But
Mhm.
Yeah.
I definitely prefer more aggressive bans than aggressive living legend, if that makes sense,
Yep.
and using that for the health of the game. So,
I agree
which
with
I
that.
think they've
Yep.
done very well so far, and I hope that the rebalanced LL system, slows things down a bit.
Yeah. Do you think 4 weeks is long enough for these like miniature competitive seasons, or do you think it should be a little bit longer?
Um, it's long enough, and I preface that by saying that it should be closer to the release dates of sets, right? I think there was too much of a lag time between when Uprising was released, um, and when Uprising was the last set, right? I'm having a blank. Dynasty's the next one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So I think there was too much time between when Uprising was released and when the Pro Tour was. It went from like a very interesting and open metagame to a little bit more of a solve classic constructed metagame and a little bit more of a solve draft format. So I think 4 to 6 weeks is probably fine for, everything. It just would have been nice to have like the Pro Tour happen and then the RTN season and then maybe Nats to finish it off, something like that.
Hmm.
But I'm fine with 4 to 6 weeks. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think for me personally, the qualifiers for it's a tough balance you have to strike, right? Because you have
Hmm.
like so many different types of players that use like Road to Nats or Pro Quests for different things, and the community is still so small that
Yep.
there is real no difference between those two for the types of players that go out to them.
Yep.
So I feel like maybe adding a week or two to those types of seasons would, I don't know, make it a little bit easier for the regular people to
Hmm.
continue to participate and be involved, because like skirmish season, unless it is limited, is still not like the, I don't know, when it's blitz, it cannot be as great of a first step outside of like armory events
Hmm.
into the competitive scene that maybe it's initially intended for, or at least that's my kind of like small critique on that front, and maybe a bit
Yeah.
of a personal bias because I'm a little too busy, and if I had an extra week or two, I could hit a few more events because we have to
No, that's a
travel
real thing. Like
like
even
five
myself,
hours
I almost.
minimum.
Oh, sorry. There's a bit of a lag there.
Oh, no worries. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I
Oh,
was
it's
just
all
gonna
good.
say I completely agree with that because I myself, RTN season was in the middle of my move back to Canada, so I almost didn't qualify for Nats again this year because I got to play one RTN the first week, and then I was moving the next 2 weeks, and then the last weekend was my last opportunity to win an RTN, and I won the last one I played in. So it's definitely a real concern because people have real life jobs, they have real life
Hmm.
commitments, and if you're going to have something as big as a national qualifier or a pro tour qualifier, maybe it needs to be a little bit longer than 4 weeks.
Yeah, especially when we don't know the exact dates of stuff when they're
Hmm.
going to happen. It makes it hard to like plan around that, especially like potentially in North America or kind of more Western countries, Northern Hemisphere, where summertime is like people's chance to vacation or, move,
Yep.
because it's like way easier than becoming a, you know, ice trucker up to, what did you call it? Snow Mexico.
Snow Mexico. I mean, that's right on that point. I think Brendan Patrick's not even playing nationals this year because
Yeah.
there was so little
Yep.
announcement time that he'd already booked his Europe trip after Pro Tour Lille. So he's just like,
Yeah.
well, I can't come back, so I guess I'm skipping nationals.
Totally.
Yeah,
Unfortunate.
that's pretty unfortunate. Yeah. I had a question here. I'm going to jump to Mitch's question
Mm-hmm.
because it kind of ties into something that I wanted to ask as well. So Mitch says, as the card pool grows, will each hero's unique strategy be diluted? In other words, will this reduce the need to understand what your opponent is trying to accomplish versus just focusing on your own strategy? Which is a thought I've been having a lot about how now there's so many viable heroes, right? Like you can face like a Dory or even a Rhinar, in addition to like a Fi or a Briar, or there's just like a lot of heroes out there. So I've found I kind of have sideboard packages
Mm-hmm.
based on my role in a matchup rather than specific sideboards and like silver bullets for heroes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's like as the game grows, your strategy into the field becomes like maybe more about your proactive plan or your roles in matchups rather than just for a long time it's always been just like, okay, in this matchup I have these silver bullets and this is how I counter it or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a question as old as TCGs, which is like, what's better to be, A plus on your game plan or have an answer for everything your opponent's doing? And I think, it was viable to kind of have an answer for everything people were doing back in the day when the game was only like a couple sets old. But as the format, or I guess as the card pool grows and grows, power creep is inevitable, right? We saw Storming Gloomvale and Revel and Rune Blood, and then Uprising led to Fi having greater go wide combat chains, and decks are becoming more aggressive, and people tend to gravitate more towards the extremes, especially as the extremes get better as the card pool grows larger. So I think over time, to answer Mitch's question, I think the better strategy will be likely to just optimize your own strategy and kind of, like you said, tweak little packages that you have here and there for overall archetypes rather than silver bullets for XYZ matchups.
Yeah. Makes sense. Excellent answer. You're passing the Attack Action Podcast test, by the way, so keep it up.
Taylor, do you have any more questions in here, or do you want me to just keep rattling off listener questions?
I
Where are we
kind of
going
had,
with this?
we should be respectful of Tariq's time here, so we are getting close to the witching hour for him. But I did want to get both of y'all's kind of takes on what you want to have from Dynasty. So I think last time like Everfest came out, I was calling for, or my hope was that we get kind of like a diversity for the existing heroes, like cards that support different stuff, like one-handed weapons in warrior, or just like kind of other strategies for other heroes. And they kind of delivered on that, but at the same time I didn't know that's what I did not want until I had it. You know what I mean? And so for Dynasty, I kind of just want what heroes are doing for them to like maybe improve on, or change the axis in which they can do what they're already doing, but have some workarounds or something. You know what I'm trying to get at here? Like, want more of what we've already got, so that whatever strategy we have going on can just be like better potentially. And maybe I won't want that when that comes out. Who knows? I don't know. It's like a flaw. But so yeah, what are your guys' thoughts?
Designing sets is really hard because it's so much like a butterfly effect, right? The butterfly effect is, a butterfly flaps its wings and it can cause a hurricane, 100 miles away or whatever, just from a chain reaction. So it's impossible to say, oh, I hope there's XYZ, because maybe XYZ, like you said, ends up becoming the worst thing in the world and we just get a Phi dominated metagame and, it just turns awful. So I think the best thing we can hope for is it creates a change that's interesting long enough that it lasts from this set release to the next one. So my hope is that whatever's released will shake up the metagame enough that it gets us through 2-3 months, so that there's only about a month left of solved downtime. That would be my hope.
Do you think there will be like a bunch of more like blitz specific support in this set also? Do we want that? Are they going to continue to do that? That's kind of what the supplemental sets have been so far.
Yeah, it seems like they really like Blitz as a format, and I guess as a store owner or tournament organizer, I see that because it's a very like player friendly, tournament friendly format where games are over and done in like 20 minutes or so. And they're even pushing it for Worlds. As a player, I don't love it as much. I think the cards don't scale for power for life totals. So, a Ravenous Rabble for 4 still hits for 4 whether you're at 40 life or 20 life, right? But the difference is one's 10% of your health and the other one is 20%. So
Yeah.
cards are just they scale so much more at Blitz, and it's really hard to balance that format. So yeah, maybe it'll be Blitz focus. It seems like they're coming out with gold tokens again. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's just a bunch of like nonsense again, like the potions and amulets, like we saw in Everfest. But who knows? As long as it has enough classic constructed cards that it shakes up the metagame, I think it'll be fun and interesting.
What are your thoughts, Isaac?
Yeah, I still have hope that the amulets and the like are like a long-term upgrade and not just kind of weird. Like there was a lot of like pick a card or,
Yeah.
knick-knack bric-a-brac or like a lot of like kind of weird cards that nobody's um
Life of the
really been
party.
able to use yet. Yeah, life of the party, which, are like fun and on theme, but just like, you wish it was something else. But I will say that I can't imagine the difficulty in creating, like I personally would like kind of like dry sideways upgrades, but
Mhm.
the reality of making a game is that you need to make exciting new things, but also keep it balanced, which I think is probably a really hard line to walk. Um,
Mhm.
but I definitely like my favorite example is Claws for Brute. That introduced like a whole
Mhm.
new archetype, but didn't break the
Mhm.
game or anything at all. So I kind of like, Claws a bit better than like, Swarming Gloomveil, which is like not
Right.
broken in any way, but it's just like a strict upgrade and makes a deck like much more powerful. So yeah,
What's
I hope for sideways or like different archetypes for heroes.
and lateral, yeah, improvement is the way to go, and I think you're completely right. And something that I think I've said before to Hayden actually when I was on their podcast is I think Flesh and Blood is a little bit weaker on purpose, like on design, and you can really tell that in certain card designs, right? Every card that draws a card is extremely restrictive in both action points or cost,
Mhm.
resource cost, and you're never really netting more than you put into these kind of effects. And I think because of that, when you miss in terms of a card being powerful, it becomes really powerful because it's only powerful relative to how weak everything else is around it, right?
Mm.
Revel and Runeblood is just 0 for 4. Um, it's not like it's broken or anything, but when 0 for 4 is the ceiling for a lot of decks, most decks, every card is only worth about 2 to 2.5 points worth of damage. That's a significant upgrade. So I think lateral's the way to go.
Sweet. Well, I'm excited still. It's a new set. And as a content creator, it's more content for us to make stuff about. So, so that's great. Yeah, we'll see how finally we get gold tokens and if this like separate resource system that they introduced in Crucible is like a thing or what they're doing with that. Like, it's just like, I have like a grip of cold foil copper and silver tokens now. Like, I don't know what to do with those. So hopefully we will get some sort of payout, pun intended, on that side of the game. Maybe, I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird set potentially. I don't know. Now we're all going to be royal. Who knows? Like,
I
are
think
we going to
I think
go
gold
ahead?
tokens are really powerful. Like imagine
Yeah.
if you somehow have 2 gold tokens in play and I mean, this allows you to replace a blue card and leave one floating, which is pretty good in of itself. It allows you to
Yeah.
cycle through your deck. And if you, that one time in a game, you draw a 2 blue heavy hand, you can just pitch 2 blues, have 2 floating, and cycle some more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think gold's pretty insane. Like anything with that amount of power, I imagine they'll limit your ability in making gold, and that'll be how it is balanced. But you know, anything
Yeah.
with those attributes or abilities or whatever is like pretty, pretty strong.
I think cash in, right, is the rate on that. It costs 4, but you can break a gold token to draw 2, I think,
Mm-hmm.
or 2 gold tokens or something like that. But we still have like, no clear way to generate copious amounts of them, which is maybe a good thing. But yeah, we'll see what happens with all of these. You still can't really do anything with silver tokens anyway. So
Have you heard of
Cash them
knick-knack,
out.
bric-a-brac?
Touche, sir. All right. Well, we're winding down on time here, unfortunately, so we did not get to all of the listener questions. Sorry, listeners, but we addressed a lot of them kind of when traveling through topics ourselves. So
Yes.
let's move on to our signature segments.
Okay, so first we have pick, pass, pray. So this is a draft scenario. I'm going to read you 3 separate cards from Uprising, and you're going to choose which card you're going to pick, pass, and then pray comes back around. Tariq, you will get to go first here since you are the guest, and then we'll go over to Isaac and I'll finish it up. Any questions? Are you prepared?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, sweet. First card up is Rebellious Rush Red. It's a draconic ninja attack action. It attacks for 5, defends for 2. It's the red, so it pitches for 1, costs 2, and it reads, go again. Okay, that is the first card. Second card is Quelling Robe. It's a generic equipment chest piece. It defends for 0, but it has Quell 1. If your hero would be dealt damage, you may pay 1 resource to prevent 1 of that damage. If you do so, destroy Quelling Robe at the end of the phase. The third and final card is Oasis Respite Yellow. Pitches for 2, costs 1, is a generic instant, and it reads, prevent the next 3 damage that would be dealt to your hero this turn by a source of your choice. If they have less life than each other hero, they gain 1 life. So, Tariq, which one are you going to pick, pass, and pray comes back around?
I guess I did have a question then. Do I know what pack or pick this is, and am I already in a deck or?
Pack 1, pick 1.
Okay. All right. So I'm not like Icelander here because that would make it easy. All right. That's tough. So they're all kind of medium cards. I'm not happy picking any of them. I would just pass them all. In a vacuum, I'd probably take the Quelling Robe. I do like the equipment, especially the Quelling Robe in certain archetypes. You do need the Quell ability to kind of survive certain onslaughts from Phi or Dromai specifically. So out of those 2 cards, I would probably just take the Quelling Robe. I would hope to wield the... I'd actually be happy wielding either one of them, but I guess praying for the Oasis Respite to come back. I think that has a little bit more utility. The life gain is very relevant, especially towards the end of the game, and it works good with Quell. And then passing the Surging Strike Red, or what's it called? Ravenous Rebellion, or something.
Rebellious Rush.
Rebellious Rush. Thank you. I just think of it as a Surging Strike. So I passed that one because it's not the best card, and you only play it when you really got to.
Totally. All right, Isaac, you're up.
Yeah, I agree. This is pretty tough without any context. I do. I actually really like Rebellious Rush red. I hate the 2 costs in Fi unless you have a Sash of Sandakai. The real strength of this card, though, is it buys 2 cards from your opponent, right? Like they don't have a choice. This turn is not one they can use to kind of take some damage to pivot, play out their hand. So that Fi doesn't have a lot of those, and that disruptive kind of threatening effect at a 5 breakpoint is like pretty impactful in the game. But yeah, I'm gonna pick the Quelling Robe. I would rather have a Sash or the Wizard Robe, but I guess odds are you won't get one of those, even though you're hoping for it. And one wasted pick isn't the end of the world. The Rebellious Rush just isn't quite synergistic enough for me to take it. So I'm actually going to hope that wheels. I think that there won't be many Fis at the table if it does. And, I would gladly pick that up on the wheel if I ended up being in Fi.
So then you're passing on Oasis Respite?
Yeah, yellow Oasis Respite actually often wheels, and I think it's a pretty good card. It's a little bit less strong in Fi because it just kind of dilutes your hands. It's pretty good on Dromai if you're not set up with AB yet. It's good for Easlander in the mirror, kind of, but it's also just like a bit niche. Great when paired with Quell, though, so not a bad pickup. So I'm pretty wishy-washy here. Pick Quelling Robe, pray Rebellious Rush comes back.
Totally cool. It's intentionally a crappy pick, pass, pray here to make it potentially more interesting, because Uprising, the card quality is like so black and white. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But anyway, so for me, I think I'm going to pick Oasis Respite first. Has kind of a lot of applications in this, like, for kind of an early pick. It could slot into some decks, and you could, in a pinch, if you're Icelander, it does pitch into Waning Moon because it's the yellow, and it also can potentially stop you from dying if you're against Icelander as well. I do hope out of both of these, I don't really care about Rebellious Rush, I think, if it comes back around. So if I haven't picked up a chess piece and the Quelling Robe wheels, then I can probably safely assume that everybody else has a chess piece that's passing to me, and then that they're a little bit better potentially. And so I should pick this up just in case I don't see something else in that slot. So, and then I'm just going to pass on Rebellious Rush. So that's my pick there.
Nice.
It's also interesting.
All different?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Go ahead, Tariq.
I was just going to say it's interesting because if you also pack one, pick one, or Rebellious Rush, you're sending like a pretty heavy signal that there's a 5 card missing in the first pack, unless it was one of the random 3. So
I think it's also rare, not actually.
No, it's common.
I thought it was common.
No. Oh, it is?
Rebellious Rush is common.
Apologies.
Yeah, so that'd be the bigger reason is I don't like sending early signals in Uprising Draft, just because then you can get some really awkward situations where somebody may latch onto that and not be, willing to move once they pick up on that one signal, which is often the case. So you might shoot yourself in the foot if you then pivot to something else, and that person to your left doesn't pick up that you've pivoted, and now they're stuck Dromai, and you get a really crappy pack too.
Yeah. It's all interesting. Draft, man. Yeah. You could then counter your counter thought, etc.
Oh yeah, there's so many levels.
Yeah, that's what's fun.
Shit, sorry. I was thinking of the wrong card, so my bad. I ruined the segment. I thought we were talking about the rare 2 for 5 with the hit effect, which was
Engulfing Flame Wave or whatever.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
My bad. No, I hate Rebellious Rush.
That's why I read it out, bro.
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, it's all good.
Anyway, well, on that note, you always got to end with a strong note. That wraps up our episode and our signature segments. Thank you so much for being here, Tariq. Good luck next weekend facing Isaac Crute, Yuki Lee Bender, and the army of Canadians facing you down.
Yeah, thanks. I'm gonna need it, and gonna have my fingers crossed. Hope I can get through that tough field.
Totally. Well, we wish you the best of luck, and we really appreciate you coming on the pod. It was great to start up a friendship with you, and I'm excited to talk more Dungeons and Dragons later after probably Worlds, when we can all relax during Christmas time. Perfect time for other
Yeah, for
indoor
sure.
activities.
Yeah, if you guys ever play online and get a campaign going, let me know. I'm always down for some casual D&D that I will min-max and definitely not try and use and abuse every rule.
Totally.
Will
Started
do.
the episode off as, I'm not a D&D tryhard or anything, but I do min-max all of my characters for maximum damage. Anyway, thanks for being on, and we'll see everybody in the next episode. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That was awesome.
Thank you for listening. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at the Attack Action Podcast. On Twitter, we are at BattleBroTaylor and at BattleBroIsaac. Shoot us an email, theattackactionpodcast@gmail.com.
If you would like to support us, like and subscribe, shop for singles using our affiliate link, or support our Patreon for as little as $4 per month.